Imagine you're a Roman senator walking through the Suburra, Rome's infamous pleasure district, when you notice a familiar figure servicing clients in a common brothel. Your blood runs cold as you recognize the delicate features beneath the cheap makeup. This isn't just any prostitute. This is Valeria Messalina, Empress of Rome, wife of Emperor Claudius, willingly degrading herself for the thrill of anonymous encounters with the city's lowest citizens. This wasn't some desperate woman forced into prostitution. This was the most powerful woman in the Roman Empire, sneaking out of the palace at night to compete with common prostitutes, determined to prove she could outlast any woman in sexual endurance. You think you know about Roman decadence? What you're about to discover about Messalina will make Caligula look like a choir boy. Because Rome's third empress didn't just abuse her power, she weaponized her sexuality in ways that would terrorize an empire and ultimately seal her own horrific fate. In the year 38 CE, Rome celebrated what appeared to be the perfect imperial wedding. Valeria Messalina, barely 15 years old, married Emperor Claudius in a ceremony that symbolized everything Romans valued: nobility, fertility, and the continuation of divine bloodlines. She was everything an empress should be: young, beautiful, from an ancient patrician family, and capable of providing the empire with legitimate heirs. Claudius, 13 years her senior and physically disabled from what modern medicine recognizes as cerebral palsy, seemed grateful to have secured such a prize. Contemporary accounts describe Messalina as possessing classical Roman beauty, pale skin, golden hair, and the refined features that marked aristocratic breeding. She fulfilled her imperial duties perfectly, bearing Claudius's 2 children and appearing at state functions with appropriate dignity. Roman society operated under strict moral codes that divided women into rigid categories. Virtuous wives and mothers occupied the highest tier, while prostitutes and entertainers existed at the bottom of social hierarchy. An empress was expected to embody feminine virtue so completely that even rumors of impropriety could destabilize the government. The contrast between public expectation and private reality made Messalina's behavior not just scandalous, but genuinely dangerous to imperial stability. But behind the marble walls of the Palatine Palace, something far darker was developing. The young woman who smiled graciously during religious ceremonies and hosted dignified dinner parties was secretly planning nocturnal adventures that would shock even jaded Roman aristocrats who thought they had seen every form of excess imaginable. The transformation began subtly during Messalina's first year as empress, when palace servants started noticing peculiar changes in her behavior. She would dismiss her guards at unusual hours, claiming fatigue, then emerge from her chambers wearing simple clothes that concealed her identity. Initially, her nocturnal wanderings seemed like harmless rebellion, a young woman seeking adventure outside the suffocating protocols of palace life. But Messalina's midnight excursions quickly evolved from innocent escapism into something far more calculated and disturbing. She began studying the routines of Rome's prostitutes, learning their techniques, their territories, and their clients. This wasn't casual observation. She was conducting research with the methodical precision of a military campaign. The first documented incident occurred during the Saturnalia festival of 40 CE, when traditional social roles were temporarily reversed and normal moral restrictions relaxed. While Claudius attended religious ceremonies, Messalina disguised herself as a common citizen and ventured into the Suburra district. What started as curiosity about how ordinary Romans lived became an obsession with proving her sexual superiority over professional entertainers. Contemporary historian Tacitus recorded whispered accounts from palace insiders who discovered Messalina's deception. She had approached a brothel keeper, offering to work anonymously for a single night. The proprietor, unaware of her true identity, accepted what appeared to be an aristocratic woman seeking excitement. But Messalina's performance that night exceeded anything the establishment had witnessed. She serviced more clients than their most experienced workers. displaying an appetite that shocked even professionals accustomed to extreme demands. When dawn approached and other prostitutes stopped working, Messalina refused to leave. She demanded more clients, more challenges, more opportunities to demonstrate that an empress could outperform any common prostitute. The brothel keeper finally forced her to depart, but the damage was done. Messalina had discovered her true calling. Within months of her first brothel experience, Messalina had developed a systematic approach to her nocturnal activities that revealed the calculating mind behind her apparent madness. She established a network of trusted servants who would smuggle her out of the palace, arranged for disguises that completely transformed her appearance, and created false identities that allowed her to move freely through Rome's underground sexual economy. But simple prostitution wasn't enough to satisfy Messalina's competitive nature. She began organizing contests between herself and Rome's most renowned courtesans, wagering enormous sums on her ability to service more clients in a single night than any professional. These competitions weren't private affairs. They attracted audiences of wealthy Romans who gathered to watch their empress degrade herself for entertainment. The most infamous of these contests occurred in 41 CE, when Messalina challenged Scylla, Rome's most celebrated prostitute, to an endurance competition. The rules were straightforward. Whoever could service the most clients between sunset and dawn would win a fortune in gold. Roman nobility packed the venue, placing bets while watching their emperor's wife compete like a gladiator in an arena of flesh. Scylla, a professional with years of experience, paced herself carefully throughout the night. She had developed techniques for managing clients efficiently while conserving her strength for the long competition ahead. By dawn, she had serviced 25 clients and declared herself exhausted but victorious. Messalina was just getting started. Even after Scylla conceded defeat, the Empress continued accepting new clients, driven by a compulsion that went far beyond mere sexual appetite. Historical accounts suggest she ultimately serviced over 30 men that night, stopping only when no more volunteers could be found. Her victory wasn't celebrated. It was witnessed in horrified silence by Romans, who realized they were watching something unprecedented and deeply disturbing. The psychological implications were staggering. This wasn't a desperate woman forced into degrading circumstances. This was the most powerful woman in the world, choosing humiliation as entertainment. Messalina had discovered that her imperial status made debasement more thrilling, not less. The greater the contrast between her public dignity and private degradation, the more intense her satisfaction became. But these public competitions were just the beginning of Messalina's descent into systematic perversion that would eventually threaten the stability of the entire Roman government. But if you think Messalina's prostitution contests were shocking, you're not prepared for what happened when she decided to make her sexual obsessions permanent. What I'm about to describe will make everything you just heard seem like innocent experimentation compared to the systematic operation she was planning. Before we dive into the most disturbing part, subscribe and hit that like button if you can handle what's coming next. And definitely comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I think it's incredible that people across the world are connected by the same curiosity about the darkest parts of human history. The next phase would transform Rome's Empress into something far more dangerous than a sexual competitor. In 42 CE, Messalina crossed a line that transformed her from scandalous empress into genuine threat to imperial security. She established what historians would later call the most audacious criminal enterprise in Roman history, a high-end brothel operating under imperial protection, staffed by aristocratic women and serving the city's most powerful men. The operation was hidden in plain sight within a luxurious villa near the Campus Martius, disguised as a private club for elite social gatherings. Messalina used her imperial authority to recruit participants, essentially blackmailing noblewomen into joining her establishment under threat of political or financial ruin for their families. What appeared to be voluntary participation was actually coercion backed by the full power of the imperial throne. Messalina's criminal genius lay in her client selection. Rather than serving random customers like common prostitutes, she deliberately targeted senators, military commanders, and wealthy merchants who possessed information valuable to imperial interests. Every encounter was documented by hidden servants who recorded conversations, identified weaknesses, and gathered intelligence that Messalina could later use for political manipulation. The Empress had essentially created a honey trap operation that made her one of the most informed individuals in the Roman Empire. She knew which senators were planning to oppose imperial policies, which military commanders harbored treasonous thoughts, and which merchants were evading taxes or smuggling goods. This information network gave Messalina unprecedented power over the very men who should have been governing the empire alongside her husband. Her methods were sophisticated and psychologically devastating. She would identify targets through careful observation at state functions, then arrange for them to be invited to exclusive gatherings at her villa. Once inside, guests would be offered increasingly exotic entertainment, culminating in encounters with aristocratic women whose identities were revealed only after compromising acts had been performed and documented. The psychological impact on her victims was calculated and cruel. Discovering they had unknowingly engaged with the Empress herself, or with wives and daughters of their political allies, created layers of blackmail that ensured absolute silence and compliance. Messalina had turned sexual shame into political control, creating a web of compromised officials who dared not oppose her wishes. But the most disturbing aspect of her operation was how it corrupted the fundamental relationships that held Roman society together. She forced aristocratic women to betray their class, coerced political leaders to act against their principles, and transformed the sacred bonds of marriage and family into tools of manipulation and control. Foreign ambassadors began